It really helps to read things aloud. As I get older, I read aloud more and more when I'm reading anything. And sometimes I do it for sense, and sometimes I do it for enjoyment. That is, reading something aloud can help you understand the text better, and reading aloud can help you appreciate it better, especially if it's well written. Well, only when it's well written. But reading aloud, it brings certain things out that may not be as obvious from our silent reading. For instance, I'm going to read you just the opening part, the opening exchange in Plato's Meno, between Meno and Plato, or Meno and Socrates. And hopefully that will show what I mean. Can you tell me, Socrates, whether virtue is acquired by teaching or by practice? Or if neither by teaching nor practice, then whether it comes to man by nature, or in what other way? Oh, Meno, there was a time when the Thessalians were famous among the other Hellenes only for their riches and their riding. But now, if I am not mistaken, they are equally famous for their wisdom, especially at Larissa, which is the native city of your friend Aristippus. And this is Gorgias's doing. For when he came there, the flower of the Aleuadae, among them your admirer Aristippus, and the other chiefs of the Thessalians, fell in love with his wisdom. And he has taught you the habit of answering questions in a grand and bold style, which becomes those who know, and is the style in which he himself answers all comers, and any Hellene who likes may ask him anything. How different is our lot, my dear Meno, here at Athens? There is a dearth of the commodity, and all wisdom seems to have emigrated from us to you. Let me just stop there. I don't know if reading aloud really helps us, or we need to help in what Meno says, but it certainly helps with Socrates. And the reason it helps is you realize that already he's being ironic. I mean, he's being heavily ironic, right? And so right away we realize that when we read what Socrates says, that there's an element of fun in it. He's making fun of Meno right away. And he's speaking ironically right away. And the thing about speaking ironically is you're not exactly lying, but you're not exactly telling the truth either, because you're not exactly saying what you mean. For instance, when he says, all wisdom seems to have emigrated from us, we Athenians, to you, the Thessalians. He's I mean, it isn't exactly not. I mean, it's a joke. He's joking around, and he probably expects Meno to to understand that he's joking around. So, the value of reading it aloud is that you get maybe a little bit of the nuance here, and it helps us to read Socrates and to realize that he's not easily read because he does use irony. It's not always clear whether he believes everything that he says, which makes reading it such a challenge, such fun, really. So reading aloud helps, and I'm not expecting, if this is your first time reading, this is Greek, ancient Greek in a Victorian English translation. Okay, so I understand that there are barriers here. I happen to favor this particular translation because it's the first one that I read when I was your age, by the great Victorian, late 19th century scholar Benjamin Jowett. It was very influential translations of Plato. There have been many more of the Meno since then, but this is the one that, I mean, it's easily available on the internet, and it's perfectly good, and I really enjoy it. So yeah, the irony. But okay, let's move on. What the heck are they talking about? They're talking about this word virtue, and the first thing that Meno asks is whether virtue is something that is acquired by teaching or by practice, or whether it comes to us by nature, whether it comes to man by nature, or in what other way. So Meno starts with a very specific question about virtue, Um, let me just get clear here. A little bored. Virtue. He wants to know whether virtue is acquired by teaching and learning and practice, or whether it's something that we have just by nature, like we're born virtuous or not virtuous. So if we go back to the text, we see that Socrates is already trying to change Meno's approach, because what does he say here? Uh, Here at Athens, there is a dearth of the commodity, and all wisdom seems to have emigrated from us to you. I am certain that if you were to ask any Athenian whether virtue was natural or acquired, he would laugh in your face and say, Stranger, you have far too good an opinion of me if you think that I can answer your question. For I literally do not know what virtue is, and much less whether it is acquired by teaching or not. Um, that is, Socrates is already turning the tables on him, or already getting him to adjust his approach, is what I really mean. Turning the tables, not turning any tables. He's telling Meno right away that his way of approaching things is wrong, because you cannot answer this question about whether virtue is acquired by learning or by practice, or whether it's something that comes to us just by nature. You can't answer that question unless you know what virtue is. You can't. That's what he means by how do I know the quid of something? If I do not know the quid of something, how do I know the quail? If I do not know what something is in itself, then how do I know how some other characteristic of it, like what sort of thing it is? I have to know the thing itself before I can characterize it and say, well, it comes by nature or it comes by practice. I have to know what it is. So that's Socrates already. Meno asks this fairly simple question about virtue, whether it comes by teaching or it's something that we have by nature. And Socrates says, I can't answer that question. I don't know how I can answer. I couldn't possibly answer that question, because I, like the other Athenians, and he's being ironic there too, believe me, he knows that most other Athenians would not say, I don't know what virtue is, but this is what he's doing with Meno. Socrates himself is basically saying, I don't know what virtue is. And we see right away that Meno is I think, legitimately surprised by that, right? By that admission of ignorance. But that's all. That's what Socrates is about, admitting his ignorance, right? And this is a very dense little response here. Mentions all sorts of names, Aristippus and the Thessalians. I mean, Meno is from northern Greece, the kind of hinterlands and the sticks, and Socrates is an Athenian, and that's really the center intellectually and commercially, politically, of the Greek world. So he's sort of ironically saying, well, you guys are the smart ones now. We're not the smart ones because you seem to know what virtue is, and we Athenians, we philosophers, we don't even know what it is. So we can't answer these questions about it because we don't know what it is. And Meno seems legitimately surprised by that. But are you in earnest, Socrates? Are you being straight with me? You really, in saying that you do not know what virtue is? Am I to carry back this report of you to Thessaly when I go home and tell people that I ran into the great Socrates? Am I to tell them that he was stupid? He was ignorant about the nature of virtue? And Socrates, is he being ironic about that? Well, seemingly not. Not only that, my dear boy, But you may say further that I have never known anyone else who did, in my judgment. That is, which is another shocking, surprising at least thing. Say, I don't know what virtue is, and I don't know anybody who did. I've never met anybody who did. I don't think there's anybody else who knows either. Well, I think at that point we have to begin to ask ourselves, well, what are they talking about here? Virtue? Why is that the center of, why is that so important to Meno? Virtue. And here we simply have to have an awareness. Like one of the things when I give you a text, when I gave you the biblical text, I asked you to have an awareness. The Ten Commandments is not a Christian text, nor is Ecclesiastes. Sermon on the Mount is. Ten Commandments and Ecclesiastes are part of the Old Testament, which is a Jewish text. The ancient Jewish people, the Israelites, wrote these texts and revered them, and they were part of their scripture. And they were adopted by Christians, right? After Jesus became, the Christians saw him as a Messiah and started a new religion out of Judaism, and they, in a complicated way, adopted the texts of Judaism, at least the text of the Bible. So here we have to be sophisticated too, and have an awareness that this text was not written in English, right? This is an English translation of an ancient Greek text. So the translator is doing his best to translate a Greek word by the English word virtue. And the Greek word that he's translating as virtue, which is perfectly good translation, is arete. And when Meno asks whether virtue is something that is acquired or comes to us by nature, and Socrates says he doesn't know what it is, they're talking about arete. That's the Greek word. And it's an incredibly important word in Greek culture, incredibly important word in Plato, and an incredibly important word in Aristotle. And we'll start there in the next video.